It's the Ed Bernstein Show, Home Edition. Now, here's your host, Ed Bernstein.
Well, it's another little over a week before the election, and we have a show that's going to help you make some decisions. With me is Congresswoman Susie Lee, and a little bit later in the show, U.S. Senator Jacky Rosen. Congresswoman, how are you? Busy, I'm sure.
Yes, busy. It's the final 2 weeks of the campaign, but doing well and happy to be here with you, Ed.
You know, so many of us don't really know a candidate's background. And I know that you grew up in the Ohio, Pennsylvania area, right? And,
yep, in Ohio.
And you grew up in a big family, right? You had what, 7 other siblings?
Yeah, I'm one of 8 children, 7 girls and 1 boy. I grew up, my mom stayed at home, took care of her kids, and my father worked for a steel company. You know, an important piece of information that applies here is, like so many Nevadans who have worked in our industries here in Southern Nevada, he was laid off at the age of 56 and struggled from there on out. And so this is a situation that I have lived through personally, and why I'm such a fighter to make sure we get the relief Nevadans need.
Yeah, well, you know, eventually you moved to Vegas, in the early '90s, and you know, rolled up your sleeve and went right to work here. You know, you became the founding director of the After School All Stars. Why don't you explain what that program is?
Sure. Yeah. So I moved here. Before I moved here, I lived in Boston and worked for an environmental consulting firm. That's where I met my husband, and we came here. He's in the gaming industry. But when I arrived here, my first job was working for the first female mayor of Las Vegas, Jan Jones, who you know well. And she and I started the city's first comprehensive homeless drop-in center. But, you know, after that, Clark County School District, as we all know, struggles a lot with funding, had to cut after-school programming. So I was the founding director of a program called the Inner City Games, which really was a way to get kids involved in sports. It's now called the After School All Stars. It provides, you know, when kids were in school, provided 2 hours of activities after school, filling those critical hours for many students whose parents are working. You know, we provide supervised homework time, but also outlets to do chess or computers or any type of sport. So really important program, and one that thousands and thousands of kids have benefited from over the last 20 years.
And then thereafter, you worked with communities and schools in Nevada, which is another huge program statewide, correct?
Yeah. So, you know, following that, I had 2 children, my daughter Nevada and son Cody, and got back into the nonprofit world about 15 years ago with communities and schools. This was at a time when Nevada was struggling with our dropout rate. We had among the nation's highest dropout rate, lowest graduation rate. And what many teachers and many educators will tell you, that the number one barrier to education success is poverty. We also struggle with close to 2/3 of our students who rely on free and reduced lunch for their nutrition at school, which is an indicator of poverty. So communities and schools was really about bringing resources into the schools, whether it's clothing, food, mental health resources, counseling, helping families. And basically we partnered with schools across not just Las Vegas, up in Reno and Elko. Now communities and schools is the state's largest and most effective dropout prevention program, serving over 64,000 students.
Well, after putting all that time into the world of education, you then went into Congress. And I know you have a reputation for being one of the few people who really reaches across the aisle and works with Democrats and Republicans. And that's been an exceedingly hard thing to do in the last 2 years that you've been there. How is it, I mean, what is your approach, and how does it differ from other Congress people? I mean, how are you able to reach across the aisle with the environment so caustic as it is?
Yeah, listen, Ed, I mean, I think one of the motivators for me running for office was obviously a continuation of the work I've done in this community for 25 years, but also frustration that many Americans share, that Congress just is too caught up in the partisan bickering to get anything done. And so, but from the minute I was sworn in, I mean, they basically guide you from like day one. Republicans go on one side, Democrats go on the other, whether it's in your committee hearing meetings, whether it is even in our orientation. Like, you would think that the Constitution applies to both Democrats and Republicans. Why can't we get together and learn about how Congress runs together? Instead, we had to divide in two different caucuses. So, you know, institutionally, Congress makes it very difficult for you to reach across the aisle. And so you have to go and really make a personal effort. And that's why one of the first caucuses I joined was the Problem Solvers Caucus. It's a caucus of 25 Democrats, 25 Republicans. I will say it's one of the most refreshing hours of the week. We meet once a week and we talk about issues like immigration reform, the USMCA, the COVID relief. You know, we were instrumental in bringing the parties back to the table and negotiating this final COVID relief package. And so, you know, this is how I feel. When we're facing, whether it was homelessness or dropout rate issue, you have to bring people together. In order to work with people, you have to have a relationship. And you can't have a relationship with people unless you actually speak to them. And so you have to go out of your way to make those opportunities and create them. And that's really what I've tried to do in my first 2 years in Congress. And I'm proud that I've been recognized by the Lugar Center as one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. The Chamber of Commerce, as you know, doesn't generally support Democrats, has endorsed me, but not only that, gave me a leadership award for my bipartisanship. And so I think that people have recognized that hopefully this is the beginning of a change and that we can start to work together more collaboratively, because that's what Americans need.
Yeah, I even noticed this week that the Review Journal endorsed you, which they don't typically endorse Democrats.
Listen, in both, you know, there's not many people who get both the endorsement of the Las Vegas Sun and the Las Vegas Review Journal. And in their endorsement of me, they basically said they like the type of leadership I'm bringing, the type of moderation, and trying to work across the aisle, which is what we definitely need more of. And, you know, compare it to my opponent, who basically comes on the campaign trail saying, I want to bring a chair to the back of Washington. You know, I'm sorry, but you can't build relationships with people when you start out threatening them. And so I think it's a very clear difference, and I'm glad the Review Journal recognized that.
Yeah, one of the bipartisan successes that you did have was working and passing some legislation with COVID-19. I know you were very much involved in that. And when you think back over the last 2 years, it's probably, I would say, the most important bill that was passed out of Congress.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, we passed 2 bills. And think about, you know, listen, when coronavirus was coming to our country, we really had not a full understanding of where we would be right now. And so, but to me, this is a time when the federal government and only the federal government can do what we did. And that is what it required. It required us to come together quickly. We passed the Families First Act. This was the first time it included one of my major provisions, which was paid family leave for families that were going to be affected having to stay home because of COVID-19. This is the first time Congress has ever passed any paid family leave. But then we passed the CARES Act, which is such an important piece of legislation. It got extended unemployment, stimulus checks, funding for our hospitals, PPE, funding for our state governments, and then most importantly, the PPP program, which provided funding for close to 50,000 small businesses here in Nevada, saving over 500,000 jobs. And so to me, and then, like I said, we have been instrumental. I have been pushing every single day. In fact, just yesterday, I was in the Washington Post I had spoken up to our speaker to basically say, get compromised. The American people, especially Nevadans, need something now, not after the election, and certainly not after the inauguration. And this is the job sent to do, and we have to come together and get something done.
What is the likelihood of that happening before the election?
Well, yeah, I mean, on Sunday, she gave a 48-hour deadline, which came in yesterday afternoon. She got together with Mnuchin yesterday and basically laid out exactly where they were. And the good news is that the appropriations committee is starting to write language. And so it's not it's not 100% done. There's still issues that need worked out. I think probably the biggest one is state and local funding. And I have to just point out that Republicans continue to say that, oh, you're bailing out blue states. We're writing language to make sure that this money goes to states that only makes up for lost revenue as a result of this virus. I mean, there's ways that you can put this in legislation where you're not giving money to someone to make up for their past mistakes. You're actually giving it to states like ours, which has seen a hole in our budget close to 25% of our state budget. And, also, first of all, I have to point out that my opponent, Dan Rodheimer, completely opposed the HEROES Act, which was passed 5 months ago. The HEROES 2.0 Act. He opposes state and local funding, but yet at the same time basically says, I support defunding police, which is completely false. And for the record, it's Republicans who don't want to include any state and local funding that are literally defunding police at this moment, because we're going to see layoffs across this country if we don't get that critical aid to state and local governments.
Yeah, and it's so critical in Nevada. I mean, last I heard, we had the highest unemployment rate still in the country, and we need some resources and help. We have about 2 minutes left, Susie, but I was curious, you worked hard. You were a freshman Congresswoman the first term. What are the things that you want to go back into Congress and complete that are left undone?
First and foremost, I think that obviously things have changed since I was sworn in. And for Nevada, it's getting us back on our feet and making sure that we bring resources into our state for workforce development, which, by the way, I've already been successful at doing. I got a $2 million grant for Nevada State College to boost up their Hispanic serving institution, their education program. I also secured $1 million for the area health education centers to boost up our health services education programs. So it's that type of thing that I'll continue to do. I think the most important thing that I'm looking forward to do, I'm on the Education and Labor Committee, is the Higher Education Act. We know that there are many jobs out there. We know we need to diversify the economy here in Nevada. We've known that for a long time. I think this pandemic has really illuminated just how vulnerable we are to downturns economically without a wide economic base. But it all runs through education. And so we need a fighter in Congress who's going to stand up to get us the funding into our schools, not just K-12, but also higher ed. And recognize that everyone does not need a 4-year degree, that there are jobs out there, whether it's IT, caregiving, cybersecurity. There's so many opportunities, green energy, renewable energy. We are poised to be at the forefront of so many exciting opportunities, but we need a trained workforce to get there. And that's exactly what I'm going to go and continue to do. And, what I've started, and I'll continue to finish that job.
And you certainly have the background and the tenacity to do that. So good luck to you, Congresswoman Susie Lee, and we'll be right back with U.S. Senator Jacky Rosen.
Thanks, Ed.
My daughter Dana fought a long battle with Crohn's disease before passing last year.
It's our goal to help the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation find a cure for this horrible disease.
Join Max and I in scoring our goal to find a cure. Welcome back. Well, it's my pleasure now to talk with U.S. Senator Jacky Rosen. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so glad to be here.
And you're still working, right? Still in D.C. working.
I am in D.C. working. Lots of work to do and lots of fight in me for Nevadans.
Yeah. And I noticed this week you were selected as one of the top bipartisan freshman U.S. senators. And, and I was talking to Susie about this earlier in the show because, also, she's got a, very bipartisan approach to what she does. Is it hard in the current environment to be bipartisan?
I think that you have to, when you come to the House or the Senate, I was also rated one of the most bipartisan freshmen when I was in the House, and the same here. I'm one of the most active. I've actually had a couple bills signed into law. Amazingly, I'm very proud of that. And I think what you have to do is, my motto is agree where you can, and of course, argue where you must sometimes. And so you have a reputation of someone who's going to work hard, who's going to sit down and get things done. So I've introduced, I think, over 30 bills myself, all of them bipartisan. I've been on hundreds of bills, resolutions, and letters, majority of them bipartisan, because people come and seek me out because they know that I will be on the bills with them, whether it's broadband, veterans, career and technical education. So a lot of things out there that we need to work on, and I want to get things done. So it's not hard for me, and that is what I believe Nevadans want and expect from me as a leader here in the Senate.
There's a lot of commonality. One of the things that doesn't seem very bipartisan is how we're voting right now in our individual states. Look, in Nevada, we've been doing this for a while, and we don't really have any mail-in problems that I know about here in Nevada. And we've had some close elections in the past too, and they seem to be working pretty well. What's your observation about what's going on in Nevada and some of the other states?
Well, in Nevada, the enthusiasm is high. I think we've had a few 100,000 mail-in ballots about so far, maybe about 500,000 votes. I don't have it exactly in the count as it is today, so this might have been yesterday's counts or that I saw in the last couple of days. And people are excited to vote. We've had a robust, trusted system. We've always mailed in our ballots in some form for people who needed to. We know 60% of people vote in early vote. We're used to that. We know our votes will be counted. We can trust that. I want to tell everybody, make a plan to vote. Vote early. You can go to iwillvote.com. If you put in your address, it'll tell you where the nearest polling place is. Of course, in Nevada, you can vote now through October 30th, and then you can vote again on election day. And if you're not registered, you can register even on election day and still make your voice heard. So your vote is your voice. And so I tell people, go out, do what's safe for you, mail it in, go early. If you like to go on election day, you're welcome to do that too. It will all be counted in Nevada, just like we always have.
And some of the other states, don't have quite the experience that we have in Nevada, but I think this is really going to change how we do elections permanently. It seems to me that the easier we can make it, as long as it's secure, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, there's some states, I think Washington State, Oregon, I know there's a few others that switched over to all mail-in ballots for the last few years. They have a very high rate of people mailing them in and being engaged. And I think the more people that vote, the better representation you have, and people feel confident that their voices are heard.
I know that the Democrats in the Senate are very frustrated about what they feel are being, having a Supreme Court vote kind of jammed down their throats unfairly. How frustrating is it? I mean, you have a minority, 47 votes. I mean, you can't really make things happen like that.
I think the frustration is in the process. So, we had the McConnell rule. So just a few years ago, if you remember, he said in an election year, we shouldn't put up a Supreme Court justice, that the voters should have their say. That's the McConnell rule. It's what he stood by. It's what everyone stood by. So now, we had, of course, the loss of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a terrible loss. And so quickly they nominate someone, they don't go through the normal vetting process, they don't get to meet with enough people. And 8 days, I think she'll be voted in on Monday, so that would put us, I think, 8 days before November 3rd. They're going to install a new Supreme Court justice where I know millions and millions of votes are already in the bank. So I'm not asking Senator McConnell to do anything that he didn't say was important to him just a few years ago. We shouldn't be voting on this right before an election with people already having their votes in the bank and not having their voices heard.
Yeah. So do you see a time in the future where the Senate actually create some regulations or regarding these type of events? I mean, instead of relying on what Mitch McConnell may, or whoever the majority leader is, may or may not say, I mean, there's really no teeth in that.
Well, I think what we have to do is return to a place, and I think that myself, with a lot of the senators that I work with on both sides of the aisle, return to that place where we listen to each other, where we respect some of the rules and of the Senate, and that we return to that civility. And so what I'd like to see happen is that we do return to some form of regular order, what we have been doing. And just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And so that's what I'd like to see. I'm working on that with a group of colleagues here in the Senate, trying to bring back that pragmatic problem solving, understanding we might not agree on all policy for sure, but there's so many things that we can work on, and that things do, people do, my constituents, people all around the country, they want to see us have the discussions. It's okay for us to talk about and debate it on the floor. They want to see that, and they want to see the friendships that are formed, and let us have those that time to work together. So that's what I'm hoping that we get to do if we have Joe Biden as our president and a Democratic Senate.
Yeah, talking about the Supreme Court, you know, they're going to be voting on pre-existing conditions, perhaps maybe even overturning the Affordable Care Act in reference to that. Would you see the Senate jumping right in after that to create some legislation to enforce pre-existing conditions in insurance policies?
November 10th on the docket is the case that will, they're trying to overturn the Affordable Care Act. Of course, one of the first things I did when I got to the Senate was to submit a resolution to stop them from doing that. And I can tell you, we're going to have to continue this fight. We're going to have to figure out what we do if they do, in fact, roll back some or part of the Affordable Care Act. We'll have to wait to see that decision. The decision, of course, they'll hear it. It won't come out. It doesn't come out right away. It'll come out sometime the next year. Normally, they come out months later, right? But in the meantime, what we're going to have to do is be sure that we protect pre-existing condition, lifetime caps. I can tell you that in Nevada, I've had so many parents come and talk to me about their children born with a terrible disease, heart disease, Crohn's disease. It's devastating. They know if there's not care, there's not lifetime caps, then their child won't get the kind of care that they need. It's devastating to people. My mother-in-law had Alzheimer's at the end of her life. People are suffering looking at their parents with cancer, Alzheimer's. We have to protect it. I had 17,000 emails to my office just a few weeks ago, primarily with people worried about what happens if their health care is taken away. So health care is on the ballot, and we have to do everything we can to be sure that there's affordable access for everyone.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't recognize. They think they have medical insurance and they think it's unlimited, but it's not.
No.
And prior to the Affordable Care Act, the typical health insurance policy had a lifetime. It was a lifetime cap of $1 million. So if you had a sick relative, family member, child, whoever, in the course of their lifetime, if their medical bills exceeded $1 million, there is no more coverage, and the number of bankruptcies in the country were skyrocketing. The number one cause of bankruptcy was medical bills at that time, and it was a big problem. So the Affordable Care Act took away the cap. Now, we all know when we get hospital bills, how easy it is to run up $1 million in bills. The other thing I wanted to ask you about with regarding healthcare, when we talk about pre-existing conditions, I really wish that both sides would talk about pre-existing conditions without raising the cost of that part of the policy, because some Republicans are saying, hey, we're going to have pre-existing conditions written into a bill so it protects pre-existing conditions. But if it's not affordable, nobody can afford to have it. Right now, if you have a pre-existing condition, you don't get charged additionally for it.
Right.
So I would hope that that those in Washington would be very clear when they talk about pre-existing conditions, that they put in the word where it will not raise the rates if you do have pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, no, I think that you're exactly right on that, because imagine that you have a premature baby, they hit that $1 million, like you said, they probably hit that pretty quick in the ICU, the infant NICU, they're called the ICU, and then they could have conditions that last them an entire lifetime. And so to be penalized for that, something that is not within your control, and it is just not right. And we need to be sure we have those protections in. I believe it's economically sound. The healthier that we keep people, then the more they go to work, they go to school, they contribute to our economy. It's cheaper for me to keep you healthy than it is for me to have you. If you're diabetic, it's better for me to give you the insulin than let you get sick and go into diabetic shock. It's better for me if you have high blood pressure to give you that medication and that preventative treatment than let you get sick. So if people just even think about the economics, not just how much it means to all of us to be healthy and take care of each other and our family, it just saves us money to be healthier and keep us healthier.
Well, Senator, thank you for reaching over to the other side and trying to get some civility into our U.S. Senate. Again, we need that. We need to get back there. And you want to send out a little vote message to our audience?
I will. I want to tell you, your vote is your voice. It is so important. So make a plan. Tell everyone you know, make sure they have a plan. There's no reason not to. You can mail in your ballot. Be sure you put it in that envelope. You sign it, follow all the directions. The post office will deliver it. You can vote early. Go to iwillvote.com, put in your address. It'll tell you the closest place for you to vote up to October 30th. November 3rd, Election Day, you can do it that day. And if you're not registered to vote, you can even register on Election Day. And so no reason in Nevada for you not to vote. I want to see, it would be so great if every active registered voter put their vote in. That would be phenomenal. It's democracy in action. So everyone go out and vote.
Thank you so much, Senator Jacky Rosen. Thank you.
Thank you.